Hi, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of Studio Jake. We've got our Disney Princess Extravaganza. We'll have more about that in a moment, but I just wanted to remind you to like this video, share it out there. Be sure to subscribe, but when you subscribe, ring that little bell because YouTube is doing this weird thing where they're curating all of your subscriptions. So ring that little bell. That way you get notifications. I've got, as you can see from my board, I do a lot of nerd commentary. And today I'm going to be taking on a different type of nerd area. We're going to be talking about Disney princesses today, and I've got returning guest, author C.S. Johnson. She's written numerous books based in various publications, and I've also got Faith Moore, who runs a new website. I'll let her tell you about it in just a second, but also the Disney Princess Fanatic Facebook page. So, Christina, we'll start with you. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Oh, this is a job interview, right?
No. Just tell a couple of your. Tell what kind of books you write and whatnot.
Okay, so I write speculative fiction. That's science fiction, fantasy. I've been getting into a lot of alternative history stuff lately that I'm really enjoying. But you can find all my work at csjohnson.me or csjohnson.me. I thought that was oddly appropriate for my secret narcissism that I joke about all the time.
And Faith, tell everyone about your website and your Facebook page.
Sure. I'm Faith Moore. I just launched a new website. It is faithkmoore.com. And I've got a blog over there and just some other info about me. And I also have which is relevant for this conversation, I have a Facebook page, which is Disney Princess Addict on Facebook. And I write over at PJ Media as well. So you can find me in any of those places or on Twitter at Faith K. Moore.
And everyone definitely check out both of these fine ladies. They are both immensely talented writers. Faith on the commentary side, which though I hear rumors she might be expanding soon. We'll talk more about that later. And C.S. Johnson on, like she said, the speculative fiction. I have read a couple of her works, and they are really excellent. But today we're talking about Disney princesses. Now, for those of you who have watched me, I reference Disney a lot because I'm a child of the '90s. That was the Disney Renaissance. What child of the '90s didn't grow up with such epics like The Lion King, which is my personally that's my favorite Disney flick. But we're going to be talking, that one doesn't have an official Disney princess, so we're going to be talking about movies like Beauty and the Beast, The Little Mermaid, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And we actually, Faith and Christina did this. They did a very unscientific study, but an accurate, non-scientific but accurate study and a poll where they asked people questions about Disney princesses and who are your favorites. So we're going to dive into that. Now, Faith, who responded the most to almost lost my camera there. Who responded the most to this questionnaire that you sent out there?
Well, we actually got a lot of responses, which was really cool. Christina actually made the survey and did an amazing job. I can take no credit for the survey.
It was very intense. I took it. It was very, very intense.
There was a lot going on there. We got, I think, over 100 responses, which was pretty good, given that it was so extensive. Almost everybody who took the survey said that they were fans of Disney princesses. So that's good. They'd come to the right place. And since I think we're going to be talking a little bit or a lot bit about how Disney princesses relate to feminism, we had asked whether the people were feminists. And just about half, 47%, said that they were not. That they did not identify as feminist, and then like 28% said that they were. So we're dealing with people who love Disney princesses, about half and half, or some didn't identify. So
binary feminist.
Yeah. So I think we're starting from a really good place of people who have, kind of like, they love the princesses, but we might come to some debate in terms of the kinds of things that people were talking about. I mean, there were definitely some interesting answers when it came to like people's favorite princesses, and people were really divided about stuff like that. So I'm excited.
And now, before we get into what the survey said, I'm curious, personally, I know I'm probably a little bit in the mainstream here, but my favorite Disney princess is Belle from Beauty and the Beast. It was just that's just such a amazing film. But I'm curious, what are your two favorite Disney princesses? Christina, we'll start with you.
Mine is actually Cinderella, and since I'm a child of the '90s too, most of the reasoning is based on nostalgia.
Makes sense.
When I was 3 years old, it came out on VHS, and my dad, he actually really he went to 3 different stores to try to find it for me one night when I was sick, and it was
wow.
a real knight in shining armor moment for him. So when I think of that, I always think of how much my dad loves me or loved me. We have kind of a rocky relationship now, so it's really nice to think about that. And I watch it all the time actually now with my daughter. She's starting to really get into the Disney princess thing right now, and it was really cool to watch it again with her and see how much gumption and determination Cinderella actually did have. So.
And what about you, Faith? Who's your favorite Disney princess?
Okay, well, I'm wearing my Beauty and the Beast shirt today, so it shouldn't be too hard to guess. My favorite princess is Belle. Yeah, Beauty and the Beast came out in 1991, which is the year that I turned 9, and I saw it 7 times in the theater.
Wow.
This is actually the shirt from the Broadway production of Beauty and the Beast, which came out in 1994, which is when I was 12. And I love that show as well, which is why I wore that, because that's like a lesser known.
You even have the books behind you too, so.
Yes, exactly. Here I am in my personal library, which is actually just a small corner of my living room. But I like to pretend that I'm here in my library, like Belle. And no, it came out the year after our family had moved us from New York City to London, England. And this story of this girl who sort of was wishing that she was somewhere else really resonated with me because I was really homesick. And I just, I love that. And of course I love that narrative of sort of drawing the prince out of the beast. So that's my favorite. But I completely agree with you, Christina, that Cinderella does not get, well, you didn't say this part, but she doesn't get enough credit for having gumption and spunk. I think that I would definitely agree.
Sarcastic in certain places. I was like, that could have been me as a teenager, easy.
Yes.
Exactly. And now we've got our rankings for favorite princesses, and I was actually a little surprised, not really surprised by who's on the bottom, but I have to admit I was surprised by who made it to the top 5. There was I'm just gonna go ahead and read off what we have here. So the first one, Belle swept the board. I mean, second place was nowhere. It was Belle. She had the most, and the common reasons for loving Belle were book lover, past appearances. She's smart. She doesn't care what other people think, and that's true, of course. Number 2, this is the one that surprised me, but number 2 barely was Merida from Brave, of course, and I'm actually a little surprised she's in the canon because she's technically a Pixar princess. I know Disney and Pixar together, blah blah blah, but I guess now she is officially part of the canon. But it really surprised me a little bit because she's just not starting out that way. She kind of moved in later. But the reasons were she doesn't need a man. She's independent. She knows what she wants. I'm just reading the top 5, by the way, for those who are wondering. Cinderella and Rapunzel tied for 3rd. My wife was very excited because Rapunzel is actually her favorite Disney princess. For Cinderella, she is kind. She is positive in the face of adversity. Rapunzel, good blend of vulnerability and independence. Her hair is cool. There's more to her than meets the eye. Number 4 is Mulan, which Faith, I know, will have some comments about that. She is brave. She saves her family. And then number 5, this is actually my least favorite princess, is Ariel. It was
we'll discuss that too later.
Yeah. And the main reason it seems to be nostalgia. It says that The Little Mermaid was the first Disney movie they saw, and they love mermaids. I don't know why they love this mermaid in particular, but anyway. So do any of the I'll start with you, Christina. Do any of the numbering, does it surprise you at all about who came out in the top 5?
I am a little shocked to see Merida up there so high. Most of our people that took the survey are either, you know, like what they're connected to like me or Faith somehow. And a lot of people know that. So I think on some level, I'm kind of wondering if maybe somebody put that just to tick you off there.
What about you, Faith? What are ones that surprised you?
Yeah, Merida came in at number 2, and that definitely surprised me. I hate that movie. I hate Merida, and I hate Brave. I hate it more than I hate Mulan.
Oh, wow.
I cannot stand that movie, not only because it literally makes no sense. Like, the plot of that movie is incomprehensible, and why are there so many bears? But also, the princess herself is, in my opinion, actually a corruption of the princess narrative. So I don't understand why you would gravitate towards Merida. So that one really surprised me. Mulan did not surprise me just because I've had so many conversations with people about how much they love Mulan. It did surprise me that first time. Yeah, including you. I mean, it did surprise me that first time. I really thought everyone felt the same way about Mulan as I did for some reason. Probably because I'm narcissistic. But I didn't know. But at this point, I was sort of like, okay, fine, Mulan, whatever. But Merida really surprised me.
And I actually like Brave, but I think that's because I do agree with you a little bit. She is kind of she's way different than even some of, like, say, Elsa. She's even way different than Elsa. But it to me, I like it though because I'm Celtic, I'm Irish, and so it was really cool to see, especially in the age where we're hating white or any culture that's based in some sort of whiteness, like me. And it's kind of like it was still kind of cool to see that story develop because I'm very into Celtic culture. And my I'm going to shamelessly plug here, in my upcoming novel, one of my main characters is based off Celtic myths. I kind of combine him with a swashbuckler esque type character, but he is based in Celtic mythology. But anyway, neither here nor there. I'm not really surprised. Merida does surprise me, and just the sense too that she I guess she's not so much new, but just because people consider her a Disney princess, because like I said, she's a Pixar character really, and I know Pixar is owned by Disney, yada yada yada, but like people don't think of put Wreck-It Ralph in the same category as Wall-E, and so that's why I was a little surprised that she was up there so high. But maybe, like you said, it was just trolling a little bit. The bottom ones,
guys.
Well, and also, here's one to throw out to my nerds. In last place, we can go through some of the other ones on this list, but in last place, I thought this was funny. Princess Leia was the bottom of the list. She only got 1 vote. She's tied with Moana and Giselle, and I was kind of like, what? I know Princess Leia is technically Disney because Disney not only bought Lucasfilms, but now they've also bought Fox. But you know, Disney's just taking over everything. Man, Warner Brothers could be next. They need to watch their backs. But anyway, I thought that was kind of funny that she got a vote in there. Sounds like a wife made her husband vote, and this, so he's like, fine, I'm going to vote for Leia, and let that be that. But do you think of the bottom ones? Let's see. We'll start. Ariel was number 5. Snow White was 6, and then Tiana 7. Aurora 8. I'm surprised Aurora wasn't higher, just because she is so popular. Then Jasmine, Pocahontas, Elsa, and then Meg
From Hercules.
From Hercules. Okay, she's a princess.
Sort of.
Okay. Well, I guess after she marries Hercules, she's a princess of Olympus, I guess. And then Giselle and Moana. But are you surprised any of those not being high? Because I thought Aurora for sure would be in the top 5. I get why Snow White's a little low because it was Disney's first Disney princess film, and so the production values weren't as good as later on. But I thought Aurora would be way higher because Sleeping Beauty is very popular.
Well, I can say, like, my daughter really likes Sleeping Beauty, and that's the one that she'll request the most when we sit down to watch a movie. And I think it's just from watching it more recently, it is more about, like, I know they made the real life version of Maleficent and everything, but
which was awful. But anyway, continue.
Yeah. It's almost like a story around her more than a story about her.
Right.
So I can understand why people would get frustrated with it, because she is really kind of she doesn't have a very strong like emotional arc throughout the film.
That's true.
I agree with that. Aurora spends 18 minutes of the movie, which I think is a little over an hour, on camera, and I think she also speaks 18 lines. So she really is not the main character of that movie. So I think when you're ranking Disney princesses, it would make sense to me that she wouldn't necessarily be in your top 5, for example, because she really isn't in the movie. I mean, the movie I think is really about the fairies who, right, we're talking about feminism, are these sort of 3 feisty women who save the day, who save Aurora from.
Come on, you got to give Philip a little bit of credit there. I mean,
who do we have to give credit? Philip?
Philip, come on.
Oh, he gets the credit. Yeah, but if you remember, he was locked in a dungeon, and Maleficent was only going to let him out in 100 years. Mm-hmm. And if those fairies hadn't shown up, I don't really know what would have happened to him. I think he would have been 100 years old kissing Sleeping Beauty, which, by the way, is one of the most terrifying villain plots, I think, in a Disney movie. That she's not just going to get rid of him so that Sleeping Beauty will never wake up, but she's going to corrupt the true love narrative and have him wait 100 years, then kiss her, and she's going to wake up and he's like 100. I don't know how she thought he was going to live to 100, but he's 100 and 20, and now she's waking up, which is terrifying. But yeah, I think Sleeping Beauty is kind of like, the movie is really beautiful. I have some problems with the movie, but the artwork of the movie is really beautiful, and I think people really love the movie, but I'm not sure about her as a princess.
You're definitely Andrew Clavin's daughter. I just heard it right there.
What did I say?
It's a very beautiful film, but I do have some problems with it. Oh my gosh, I've heard that every time he reviews a movie.
Well, I didn't know that I had picked that up from him, but maybe I have.
He's actually quoting verbatim from his review of Baby Driver. Come to think of it. So remember that movie? That's what he said about it.
Yeah, and he said that after he and I talked about Marvel films, and he likes Logan, which I know I'm in the minority. I hated Logan. I thought it was a terrible movie, but that's after I left. He said, "Well, I did like Logan. I did have some problems with it, like exactly like that." That's what was making me think about it. It was so funny. But anyway, okay, sorry, we'll move on.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go for it.
So I was, like, when it comes to like the story arc, though, especially like kind of building on what we were talking about with Aurora, is like a lot of people go to the movies to like find superhero movies, and like for men, and the princess movies for women to like find themselves. I mean, you lose yourself to find yourself. That's how McKee puts it. And I don't think, like, outside of like my mom life, it's like I wish I could get somebody to get me to sleep some days. So I feel like Aurora's story arc isn't as impactful as, when people talk about Merida, in contrast to this idea of rebelling against your mother. I mean, what teenage daughter hasn't had that "I'm gonna hate you forever" conversation with her mom at some point? So I would probably think of it in terms of more of the universals when it comes down to the popularity specifically.
So you're saying it's more about relatability, kind of, maybe?
Yeah, on some level. And that's why I actually like the movie Mulan, but I don't consider her a princess, like, in my own mind. So.
Yeah, I know. That's what whenever they added her to the canon, I was a little surprised because Mulan, Shang isn't a prince. I mean, he's the son of a general. And so I don't even really know why. Faith has the answer. Go for it, Faith.
In order to be an official Disney princess, you either have to be born a princess, marry a prince, or do an act, a feat of like valor or some sort of like adventurous thing. Basically, like Mulan qualifies because they want her to be part of the franchise.
I got you.
Like, you have to do something brave, essentially, if you don't happen to be like actual royalty.
Okay, that makes sense.
Kind of like the Hercules challenge. It's like you must prove yourself a true hero / princess.
She has proven herself a princess.
I could be wrong, but is Hercules the last like prince movie? Like, I don't think they've done one with the strong male protagonist, which they weren't really big on prior. But like, even like we were before the show, we were talking about Black Cauldron, the main character, and movies like The Black Cauldron, The Sword and the Stone, Lion King. they're these strong male protagonists. But I did notice one thing in the 90s, the Disney Renaissance, while the movies were more aimed, the animated films were more aimed toward a princess narrative, which their live action films were more for male audiences. So like you have Cool Runnings, you have Blank Check, which were all more sports. And then Blank Check is about, what kid wouldn't love this? He gets $1 million accidentally from a mobster, and then he just goes on a big spending spree. He buys his own house. I love that film. That's a.
I remember this movie actually. Now that you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's on Hulu. I love Hulu. I've been able to watch all my Disney nostalgia now on between Hulu and Netflix. But anyway, that's just an observation I noticed. But now we're gonna shift to the controversial topic of why Faith Moore hates Mulan. This is very controversial. Me and Rosemary Duar, who's a friend of mine, we actually tag teamed Faith. Poor Faith. She had these two nerds coming after her, and we about her distaste for Mulan. So we're gonna. I really am curious, because on Twitter it's 280 characters. You don't really know the whole thought process of it. So I'm curious, why does Faith Moore hate Mulan?
Okay, so I've come prepared. Okay. So it isn't exactly Mulan herself that I hate. It's the conceit of the entire movie, which I think is dishonest. So up until this moment, with the possible exception of Pocahontas, which was a terrible, terrible movie, the Disney princesses who came before weren't actually dealing with issues of gender. Mm-hmm. They were dealing with an internal transformation from feeling like they were somehow not who they were meant to be, to sort of having a goal, figuring out what that goal is, and figuring out what they needed to do in order to meet that goal. And in doing that, they sort of grew from child to adult, from girl to woman, right? And that was the kind of struggle of the Disney princess, and it was an internal struggle. Mm-hmm. Mulan sets up a situation in which the question is not, what is your inner struggle and what is your dream or your goal? The question is how to be a woman. What does it mean to be a woman as opposed to a man? Because her scenario starts out with the matchmaker and her parents telling her, this is what a girl has to do. She has to look a certain way. She's got to marry the guy. She's got to do all this stuff. And instead of, which has never happened in a Disney movie except for Pocahontas, which was the one right before. So it's something that Disney is starting to do. It's never happened before.
I don't agree with you at all with the Pocahontas comparison. I think they're totally different.
They're different movies. I'm just saying that Pocahontas is also terrible, and Pocahontas also sets up this, you have to marry a man or do something else.
I don't agree with that about Pocahontas at all.
Her dad is like, you have to marry Kocoum because he's safe and dependable, and her thing is like, do I marry the safe, dependable guy, or do I go find out what's around the river bend?
All right. Well, anyway, continue with Mulan. We'll get back to this. I didn't know I was going to have to take on 2 movies. So let's do this.
Okay. So her issue in the beginning is, how do I be a woman without being this kind of woman that everyone is saying I have to do? And then the very next thing that happens is she has to go to war and be like the men. And I think that the setup of the movie is sort of saying, in order to be successful, to be a success in the world, we're going to measure you against the standard of men. And I think that that's really unacceptable. I don't think that we should be telling that to little girls. I think it negates the feminine strength of the princesses that came before and of the girls. And the other thing is that I understand and I get it. I get that she doesn't actually whatever, kill everyone in the army, or, that she uses her brains and that she does all of this stuff. But even so, her success is measured by whether she was able to, best the guy in a fight, or bring down the avalanche, or all of these things. These are all sort of male military things. And that is any of that stuff is a talent that you might possess or not possess. And that's not the point of a princess. The point of the princess is to have an internal courage, internal drive. What is Mulan's goal in life? We don't know. At the end of the movie, the emperor is like, hey, you want to be on my council? You want to get to keep doing this kind of thing? And she says, no, I don't actually want this. So we spend the whole movie, we don't know what she wanted. You know, Ariel wanted legs. You know, Cinderella wanted to escape being a servant. We don't know what Mulan wanted. And so, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I disagree with that. I think that Mulan, because it's true about previous Disney princesses, but I feel like Mulan, it's more about what is happening right now. Right now, I want my goal is to keep my father safe. I don't, because he'll die if he goes to war. And so I'm stepping up and I want to save him. I saved him. The war is over. I'm going home. And I don't think I need to know what what her 5-point life plan was to connect with that. And I get what you're saying, but I don't think that the movie was about, oh, you have to measure up to be a man. She was entering the army, which at the time in ancient China, especially, was a man's world. It's a Chinese folklore story. And lying about your gender could get you killed. And so she is, to me, it's more about self-sacrifice. I'm in this moment, this is what needs to happen. I need to put myself in danger because my father could die. And she even has an opportunity at one point to leave because Shang just basically says, you're not a soldier, you have to leave. But I feel like then she would have brought shame to her father on his house, because then she wasn't a child, and then he would have been a laughingstock. So to me, it's about her sacrificing her own self in order to save her father, and I think that's a noble thing. I don't think it has anything to do with measuring up to be a man. I think that it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I just think it's about her doing the right thing in that moment. That's why at the end she's like, well, I don't really want to do this. I was just doing this to save my father.
Okay, I'm gonna cut in.
Go ahead, Christina.
Okay, so I like what you guys are saying, and this is my take on it. I don't have the greatest relationship with my father. My life has been sort of like Mulan's in the sense that I feel like her biggest thing is to please her family and to bring honor to them so she can belong with them, if that makes sense. Like, I think when you don't get along with your father, and they have actual studies that kind of show this, like if you don't have a father in the house, you're like 30% more likely to wind up pregnant as a teenager. A lot of kind of problems like that. Like, so for me, understanding that she wants to make her family happy, that's kind of like, oh my gosh, I get it. It's the moment where you kind of realize that she's setting out to find a way to connect with her life and herself, and kind of bring into the harmony between them, where she can still be herself and still bring honor to her family, especially after the disaster at the Matchmakers, where it's like, this is what I need to do to please my father, to have my family's acceptance. I mean, because my dad was my parents were very big on certain things, and like, honestly, I know I didn't live up to their expectations and X, Y, and Z in certain ways. And that does have kind of a lasting pain that doesn't go away exactly. It's, and like, it does have its own, I mean, you do find resolution, praise God for Jesus, right? But you do have kind of those lingering pains. And when she's sitting on the mountain after they find out that she's a woman and that she's not who that they thought she was, and she's like this big fraud, it's every kind of like broken daughter's worst nightmare, I think. And you kind of sit there and you realize that you have to be yourself for who you are, and it's like, you have to face the fact that your life might not match up to what is expected of you. So I think you have a blind spot there, because I love your dad.
Well, yeah, I absolutely. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, I see what you're saying there, but but again, I still think it's more about what is happening now, because one of the bad things about Disney films is it does give you, and this is even though I love Lizzie McGuire and even Stevens, they teach you that you can resolve everything in 20 minutes, and that's kind of the problems I have with some of these
Yeah.
Disney films, even though I love them, it's just, but I feel like Mulan, it's like, what is happening right now? Let's make a decision for right now. Does that make sense?
Well, it kind of plays into that, and it's one of those things where you have like in the hero's journey, in the actual epic breakdown of it, which is why I don't consider her more of a princess, is because if you follow the arcal structure of the story, it's more set up like an epic. So you have like the call to adventure and being forced to accept the call, and then the training, the mentor figures, the rejection of men, and you know, like it's obviously a little bit different for a woman versus man, but you do have the quest for the father, which is why, like I said, talking about the honor and the belonging to the community and everything.
Go ahead, Faith, jump in.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
So I guess what I want to say is that I agree with you as it pertains to the actual story. Like if we just sort of take the story as itself, and we don't look at it within the greater kind of canon of Disney princesses and what the princess narrative is, et cetera, then I totally see what you're saying, and I see how it could feel really helpful to you if you're feeling like, you know, your relationship with your father is somehow similar to this. I can totally see what you're saying there, and you're right. I do have that blind spot because my dad is cool, and I hear you, and I understand that you know, and that resonates, and we all have different things that resonate for us. So, you know, to all of those people who out there who are like, why do you hate Mulan? I love Mulan. Like, hey, love Mulan, go for it. I'm just I'm gonna tell you why I don't.
About the marketing on it. So
sorry, say that again.
Oh, I was going to say, I totally agree with you about the marketing. It feels like kind of like a switch when it comes to the princess thing.
Right. Well, I guess what I was going to say then is that, you know, within the story, obviously, yeah, she's very brave. She does the thing she has to do. There wasn't, you know, the other choice was, you know, her father's death. That's awful, you know, and she is exposed, and she has to figure out what she could have left and given up, and she didn't. And I see all of that. I think my real issue with the story is why suddenly within this arc of, you know, Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, The Little Mermaid, Belle, Pocahontas, this arc is trending towards, or sort of away from, this kind of feminine internal journey and towards, I mean, the fact that you compare it to the hero's journey is really telling, because the hero's journey is a male journey, right? So it's sort of away from these feminine strengths that I think are really important for us to hold on to, and towards these sort of male strengths. And even if you're saying like, no, she doesn't, you know, she doesn't actually try to be a man, the idea of the film is to kind of bring it into this gendered world, this world of like, there are men and there are women, but the women have to make it with the men, and the men don't have to do what the women do. You know, this whole kind of structure, I find it problematic, right? I have a problem with this idea of shifting the princess narrative away from the inner journey and into the hero's journey, which is an inner journey, but it is also very much an external journey. And I think that is really my issue. I don't have so much of an issue with what actually happens in the movie and how it happens for Mulan, except that I think, you know, you say we don't need her 5-point plan for the future, but if she's going to be a princess, we actually do, because a princess narrative has to take the girl from child to womanhood, and part of womanhood is sort of knowing that her life is going to be okay, and part of an okay life is knowing what are you going to be doing. I mean, we leave her at home with mom and dad, and the guy comes, and she's probably going to marry him, and she's probably going to be a housewife the way that she wanted her to.
Well, there you go. So that's how all the Disney films end. The guy comes in, and it's implied that they get married and have a happy life. I mean,
but only after the girl has transformed in some way in her inner self and reached the goal that she had without the man. But
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think it's more like she reset herself to what she was doing. That's what I was saying. She accomplished her goal.
What does she want in life? What does she want?
I don't care, honestly. I don't think it was a movie.
I think we should care. But I think we should care. That's all I'm saying.
I think you're just reading too much into it. Like it could.
You can definitely. I will definitely take that criticism.
But I do see what you're saying, and also Mulan is not built on Western values. It's a Chinese folklore built with Eastern values. And as a student of the martial arts, just to brag a little bit, I studied a lot of Eastern mythology. I studied a lot of Eastern way, and I feel like us in the West, we look at stories like Mulan and we see it that way. But I don't think in the East, it's not really about that. With the East, everything has to have balance, and sometimes it's a little annoying to us Westerners. But I love anime. It's the same way. Sword Art Online, which I adore. It's the same way. It's all about. Although that one, the main character definitely goes on what I would call a hero's journey, Kirito. But anyway, we're gonna have to agree to disagree on this.
Absolutely,
and you'll be able to
agree to disagree. I'm good.
But you'll get a chance to get me back though, because I'm about to read the least favorite Disney princesses. So, Snow White was the #1 least popular. Which that one, I'm not surprised she's on the list in the top 5. But I was surprised she was #1. But here we have a controversy on #2, because #2 is Merida. She was #2 on the most popular. So then we have Pocahontas, and the main criticism of the Pocahontas one, it seems, is it's not like the real story. Which, honestly, why would you want it to be like the real story? She dies when she's 20. I mean, anyway. So then we have Elsa. Not surprised. And Aurora. We talked about a little bit about that earlier. Then we have Anna, which. Anna surprises me because to me, whereas Elsa is a different sort of princess, to me, Anna's more like the Disney princesses. But okay. And then we get back into the more popular. We've got Cinderella, Ariel, who should be #1 on this list as the least popular. And then we have.
I want to know what you read about this movie.
Come on.
And then we have Tiana, who's barely a blip on the radar on both lists. And then we have Jasmine, Moana, Mulan, Rapunzel. Why? When it comes to Snow White being #1, it says she has no agency, which for us lay people, that means she doesn't really have good character development, which is true. She just kind of stays the same the whole movie. And then, oh, okay. Well, I'll let you. Just let me read the other point. The other point is she's gullible, which that is true. She is very gullible throughout the film. She basically falls for anything anyone tells her in the film. So I do understand that a little bit. So Faith, go ahead. I'll let you jump in about the no agency part. So, or say whatever. What would you?
Yeah, no, I was gonna. So I wanted to kind of try to redeem our girl Snow just a little bit.
It was better in the first season of Once Upon a Time. But anyway, continue.
Okay, that show was my guilty pleasure, but I will say, no, I think that Snow White gets a bad rap because people don't really understand what the story of Snow White is actually about. I mean, as a fairy tale, the fairy tale of Snow White is about puberty.
Oh, and interesting. I didn't know that.
I'm not going to do this whole thing right now because whatever, it's kind of inside baseball, but like the apple represents like sexual awakening, right? As it often does in literature. I'm just putting this stuff out there, okay? That the story of Snow White is really symbolic, and it's kind of an allegory for puberty, because it's about this old crone who can't deal with the fact that the young maiden in her home has reached maturity, as displayed by the prince's sudden interest in her. Okay, so first of all, I think that when you're looking at Snow White, you just can't read it as a literal story. You can't. There's nothing there, and the way that Disney portrays it is also very symbolic. Everything in there is a symbol. So I think there's that. But I also think you've got this girl. I mean, let's look at it literally for just 1 second. You've got this girl who is a slave, essentially. She's at the whim of her evil stepmother. She's got to do all the chores and everything else. She's told that she is going to get killed if she doesn't run away. So she runs away. She finds a house full of slovenly men. She knows how to do chores because her stepmother has made her do it. And she thinks to herself, I will make them a deal. I'm going to do the chores in exchange for them, feeding me and housing me and all of these things. And she does. How resourceful is that? How entrepreneurial is that? right? She makes this deal and they say, sure. And it doesn't work out because, yeah, she's kind of gullible. And that has to do with why all of the stuff in the story is happening symbolically. But, you know, I just think that that gets overlooked a lot of the time. What do people want her to do? Throw herself at the mercy of these men and say, oh, please, save me? No, she's got to do the, you know, she's got to keep up her end of the deal. And I just think that that is something that is often missed about Snow White.
Oh, that's a good point. Christina, do you want to chime in?
Well, it's also interesting that she doesn't try to reason with her stepmother. So
well, the huntsman told her to run away, right? He was about to cut her heart out.
I will say too, like speaking to the gullibility part, like they're like in every, like from childhood, like in back to the archetypal thing is like you have the end of innocence, and I think gullibility kind of comes along with that. So like because you don't. I mean, like, if you're like Snow White, you're pretty sheltered sometimes from the world when you grow up. And then to have people, to, like, have something, like, really happen that, like, shocks you to the core. Like, my coming-of-age moment, honestly, was 9/11. I was 13 at the time. That was a pretty, like, literally half my life can be divided into different things. You know, it's, like, it's very shocking to someone who just grew up in America. It's like, oh, and then this terrible thing happens, and then you wonder if you can ever look at certain things ever again. You know, I go through the same thing with a lot of my books with, you know, devastating revelations that kind of rewrite your history. I got into a Twitter debate once about apologetics, which would for like when you talk about why you believe in God, and somebody said, you know, like, why do you believe in God? You just believe in God because you were raised in the church, blah, blah, blah. And I talked about how, like, if I found out God was fake, it'd be like finding out my mother was some kind of spy.
Right.
You know, it's like, I mean, like, I know I believe in God because I just like the same way I know I believe, like,
okay.
Sky is blue. And so with innocence kind of playing into that gullibility, you know, your whole world is wrecked and you kind of have to fall back on what I call the default. So Snow White does that very well. She goes back, she tries to make a home for herself. She builds it up, you know, kind of like a motherly, helpful relationship with the dwarves, and she adds beauty and order to their life. It's a very nice redemptive arc, but I do agree with Faith that you do kind of miss it sometimes. Just more subtle aspects of it.
That makes sense. And now to my thing. I think Ariel should be #1 on this list.
Tell us why, please.
She is a horrible example for young women. She basically whines the whole movie about getting her way. She betrays her father. She betrays her heritage. She betrays her family, all to get this prince. And there's really no. To me, it is the feminist story. It's the third wave feminism. She trades her voice, which is, in her case, is the symbol of her beauty, to pursue this guy, and who she knows nothing about. Which, okay, granted, that's pretty much every Disney princess. She doesn't know anything. That's the joke in Frozen, right? They don't know anything about the men they're marrying. And but I just feel like there's no, and it ended up she doesn't even do anything to help resolve the issues that she herself created in the film. Eric has to bail her out, and it's like, and all this stuff. And I think that that's why I don't like the movie. It's just and even in the TV series that came after it, every episode is her whining about something. It's just like, shut up, like that's why I think like. And also, she's kind of underage, which, granted, all Disney princesses are, I guess, technically. It depends on who you talk to. But, you know, it's just kind of like, to me, if we want to talk about, like, a third wave kind of representation in Elsa and whatnot, I think Little Mermaid was kind of that first step toward feminism, because she's clearly not that she's clearly not that person who, like you said, she goes through this kind of inner struggle. She doesn't. All her thing she wants is strictly it's just fame. She wants to make herself more beautiful, and it's just like, give me a break. And I'm supposed to think that this is noble? This isn't noble at all. It's just her getting, and then she causes all this trouble, and then she gets what she wants in the end, and with no sacrifice. And I just think that is I think that is why I don't like the movie. It's like she causes all these problems and she still comes out on top. And
can I respond to this, please?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. That's what. Oh, wait. One last thing that you're really gonna hate. That's why I think the second one actually makes more sense in the vein. I'm not saying it's a better film, but it's about her daughter who wants to know more about her family, and it's even though the movie is way worse, it's still the plot of that film makes more sense than the plot of the first Little Mermaid. Okay, respond. Go for it, Faith.
Okay. So the first I just want to, before I forget, I want to say that it definitely does mark the shift towards the more feminist movies. That is definitely the place where you can say, okay, they started to actively think about feminism, whereas before, obviously, they really weren't thinking about that. But I think that it's fine. Like the themes in the movies are fine until Pocahontas. Let me paint a different picture, right? You just painted a picture of what that movie is. Let me paint a different picture.
Okay.
Ariel is a person who believes that she was born to be human. And we know this because for the first, 20 minutes or so of the movie, the prince has nothing to do with it. She spends the first 20 minutes convincing us that she's obsessed with the human world. She wants to be human. It's not really a cultural thing. It's an internal desire to be something that she is not. And her father has no understanding of this whatsoever. Her father can't understand that she wants, it's like she grew up in a family of musicians and she wants to be a rocket scientist. And her parents are like, no way, you absolutely have to be a violinist. And she's like, fine, then I'm going to go my own way because this is my dream. Okay. If that is something that is happening for you, you do have to defy your parents. You don't just defy your parents wantonly. Obviously, we don't want to teach little girls that whenever they have a whim, they should just sort of say, forget it and not listen and be disobedient. But I do think it is an important message to tell people that if you feel that you have a calling and your family does not understand that calling, you do have to go out on your own. And so that's what she does. Eric is the catalyst for that in the way that most of the Disney princes are. He's the catalyst to help her. Love is the catalyst to help her realize her dream. She gives up her voice because her voice represents her internal self, and it's her internal self that will allow Eric to love her. And he never loves her. He doesn't fall in love with her. He doesn't even recognize her until she gets that back. And all this talk about, you've got your looks, your pretty face, and never underestimate the power of body language, right? That's the bad guy, right? The bad guy says that. So that's wrong. It's not about her physical appearance. It has to do with something inside. And then even like Sebastian is like, you've got to bat your eyes like this, right? But she's asleep. She doesn't hear that. So for her, this is a journey about becoming who she truly was meant to be. And so she has to break away. She has to break free. And love is the catalyst for that. And I think that that's a really nice message. And I think that the story sort of depicts that. And at the end, no, she can't get it the way that she tried to get it because there's evil involved. She has to get it. She has to get it through good, and she has to reconcile with her father, and that's what she does. And he finally sees. Oh, you want to be the rocket scientist, not the musician. Okay, I get it. Now you can have legs. And I think that ending sort of is about their reconciliation and his understanding that she really had something of worth that she needed to do with her life. And so I think that's just another picture of what that movie's about.
I can feel. I felt what you were saying, but I'm not totally convinced. Christina, do you want to agree with Faith, or do you have your own thoughts? What do you think?
I have my own thoughts on this. Okay, so this is actually one of the ones that I've been watching a lot more lately with my daughter, and
well, the music in it is beautiful. I won't deny that. It's one of the best soundtracks.
I think Avery purposefully decided she wanted to watch all these princess movies just because she knew I was going to do this. 3-year-old. But when I watched the movie, I feel like, as like a parent now, I feel this is more of a struggle between it's a more of a parent-child problem and that might just be because of my own hormonal overaged brain, you know. But I see like King Triton doesn't really understand his daughter that much, and even in the Ariel's beginning movie, like since you referenced number 2, I'm going to reference number 3. Like
I've never seen number 3, so you got one up on me there.
You know, like he has his own kind of like biases and prejudices when it comes to the humans, and when it comes to Ariel, like she doesn't have that trauma as much as he would, and like her curiosity, I think, is kind of sparked by the forbidden, and he doesn't kind of know that. Like he's running the kingdom, and so he's kind of just very distracted, and it's when this, you know, kind of like the sea witch, you know, Ursula shows up and creates a problem that kind of forces him to face hard truths about his daughter. I think it's one of those things where I could really say it's either way when it comes. I know it's not a traditional Disney princess in the same vein as Snow White and Cinderella, but it is still kind of relevant to that parent-child connection where, like you said, Faith, with the like he doesn't know what she wants, and he's very against indeed what she does want, and he has to kind of face his own prejudices, and then she has to realize that you know, can't use evil to get what you want. So it's kind of like it's almost like for me, it's like a dialectic sort of tertiary plot line, especially with Eric and the prince, Eric and the sea witch, Ursula, and their own sort of land versus sea battle that kind of ensues. So I have nothing to offer.
Well, here's the key thing too is to me, again, that goes back to what I was saying, where Ariel does nothing to stop Ursula. I mean, it's just kind of like, oh, yay, Eric bailed her out. That's what I'm saying. It's like
she does kind of start to fight back after her father kind of frees her from the contract by taking her place.
And doesn't she yank on the trident to make?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I thought, what's his name? To her though. but
that thing, the eels. She kills them because she attacks Ursula for she's trying to harm Eric. Yeah.
Right.
Well, all right. I'm still not convinced. But that brings us, you know, as you said, Faith, it was kind of you can definitely see the shift more away from the traditional femininity of princesses to a more feminist tone, and like they embraced it fully with Frozen. Not so much with Moana. I felt Moana was a little bit more nuanced than Frozen was to me, especially since Moana was such a young character, whereas like there's always this debate about how young the Disney princesses are. I think unless it's explicitly stated, or and Walt Disney himself made some references, there's always like this debate among fans. But I feel like with the way they shifted with Elsa, it went away from femininity to feminism. And the sad part about Frozen is actually one of my disappointing things about Frozen, and even Moana a little bit, is there's no good villains in it. And so there's nothing to challenge the, like we were talking about the femininity of the princesses. Are they gonna stay? How are they gonna evolve? There's really no what's the word I'm looking for? There's really no evil to combat the good. And to me, Frozen is very narcissistic in that way. To me, it shows the narcissism that it's going. And we got some responses back. I'll pose the question: do you agree with the shift from traditional princesses to feminist one? Majority said no, but there were a fair amounts of yeses. Those who said no tended to say that traditional princes are already feminist, or they like the femininity of the traditional princesses. Those who said yes tended to say that they liked how the newer princesses think for themselves, and that the older princesses are fine, but they're products of their time, and we need princesses who are more modern, and that to me is a problem. Getting into this, we're going to put our postmodern values on a older value system. It doesn't make, to me, that doesn't make sense. It would be like, so is King Arthur going to be a bisexual King Arthur? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. But I'll let you two weigh on this, and also on the diversity question. To me, this one isn't really a thing. I know this is something that the SJWs bring up. We got 50-50 people who said that the focus itself should be on I'm assuming this is racial diversity when y'all asked this question. Was that component on the?
That's the one I was thinking of.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure. Most said no, because it wasn't important, because the movies are about the stories, not what the princesses look like. And that's a good thought. So I'm curious if y'all want to jump in here. To me, I don't care if you want to make a movie that's based on if Disney wants to make a movie that's based on an African legend, just do it. And that's all I care about. I mean, I actually liked The Princess and the Frog, especially since it was actually their last traditionally animated film. I really miss those.
Yes.
So, but anyway, I'll let y'all weigh in. What do y'all think about this? Like you mentioned Mulan, Pocahontas, and I mentioned Ariel. What do y'all agree with me that you feel like Elsa was kind of like the last shove? Because I felt like Rapunzel was kind of more of a throwback princess, whatever you think of the film itself.
Right.
But I really feel like Elsa was that push to that direction.
I can go.
Go for it. If you go first.
Okay. Yeah. So when you track the arc of the princess stories, The Little Mermaid is definitely where the filmmakers start talking about feminism, and they're definitely talking about it again in Beauty and the Beast. Linda Wolverton, who wrote the script for Beauty and the Beast, said that she wanted Belle to be a feminist heroine. Mm-hmm. So they're definitely thinking about feminism in the 90s, whereas they weren't back in 1939 when Disney made Snow White, for example. And it does sort of swing in this arc, and I agree that Rapunzel is this random sort of throwback, and so is The Princess and the Frog, interestingly, but it's kind of hiding inside of a more feminist-looking story. Right. But it is actually a much more of a traditional story, which is why I like it, in addition to the artwork. But I think, you're talking about the villain in Frozen. The villain in Frozen is the patriarchy. Because Hans is this great guy initially, and there's absolutely no foreshadowing that he is going to turn out to be a psycho killer, except that he's this great guy.
Oh, no, there's one scene. But anyway, continue.
Okay, but yeah, that's true. Okay, there is one scene, but basically, I mean, even when Anna's not around, he's like passing out the blankets and like doing the stuff. He acts like a good guy, and the only reason that we can say, oh, okay, yeah, it makes sense that he's a villain is because, oh, he's a great guy. He must be a villain. There's nobody out there like that. There's nobody that you could fall in love with at first sight, right? So the idea is this is the world of the patriarchy. And in the world of the patriarchy, the prince is not the good guy. And so I think that is really kind of what's going on in that story, even though it's really kind of mixed up. Like when you look at it, it's really kind of mixed up and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But back to Merida, where Brenda Chapman, who conceived of the story and co-directed Brave, and then they kicked her off for some reason that nobody knows.
I can guess.
Yeah, but we can guess, exactly. She said that she wanted to turn the whole notion of these damsels in distress on its head. Mm-hmm. And she definitely turned the princess narrative on its head. I may be about to give away the answer to my Tuesday trivia question, which you can subscribe to on my mailing list on faithkmore.com and be part of Tuesday trivia, which the answer to this week's will be on Monday. But I'm about to give it away because the final sequence of Brave is identical to the final sequence of Beauty and the Beast, except that the beast being transformed is the mother instead of the prince. And basically, Brave is a story that says, don't grow up. Don't become a woman and find the prince. Stay a child cleave to your mother. She had a mother who didn't understand her at all, and of course all those suitors were terrible. She shouldn't have picked any of them, but she doesn't. She wanted this adventure, and she doesn't go out into the world and get it. She partakes in the symbolism of Beauty and the Beast, which is a symbolism all about kind of these two souls merging, and it's beautiful. She partakes in that with her mother, and that's just this corruption of the princess story, and that's what's kind of going on as the feminists take control of the narrative.
And that's one thing too, is now like we saw in Ella Enchanted, which was like when they're fighting the evil dragon, you know, what's the dragon saying? Oh, the princess is saving the prince. What a twist on the story. And so do all the, you know, one thing we asked is, do all the princesses have to save the world? It's like they're trying to, like you were saying, they're trying to say that it is womanhood and girlhood isn't really strength. And Christina, I want you to weigh in on this. Is you know, one thing that we talk about who tend to be more traditional, who don't like third wave feminism, is women are valuable in their own right. Like you don't, and even as a guy, we're told, you know, your value comes in the work you produce for your family. What do you produce? And now it's like they're trying to do that with women, but women are valuable in their own right. Womanhood is valuable. Girlhood is valuable. And so, Christina, I want you to weigh in on this. Just where do you think they're missing the mark at, like Faith said with Brave, where they're kind of turning the damsel in distress on their head?
Well, this is a fun topic. Well, when you consider the arc of the feminist narrative, when it comes to starting with the Little Mermaid, you kind of have this question of where is this going, and you know, kind of like it's like navigating the dangerous curved highway thing with some of it. And for me, like a lot of times, I think people forget that women produce families. You know, women produce children. Women are the reason that people have legacies. You know, I mean, like I actually have a scene in the third book of my my Beauty's Curse series where the bad guy and the princess are talking, and the princess even says, "Why do so many people care who I marry?"
Right.
Villain tells her, men cannot create things. Men cannot create things on their own. They need women, and only women can create something that men will protect, and men will destroy other kingdoms for. And you know, like kudos to my villain. Right. You know, because that's really the truth. Is like women have to produce. I mean, women produce people and other princesses. And I think my big beef with feminism is that I don't get to see Belle raise her child and how she gets him to her ADHD child to learn how to read. You know, that's the failure of feminism for me on my end with this. It's like, I want Disney princess mothers, or, you know, Disney princes. I mean, we don't have Disney princes movie. I think Aladdin and Hercules are probably, and The Lion King are probably the only ones I can name that kind of go through that growing up, coming of age arc. And so what you kind of have with the brand then is that it takes on this kind of Altered Carbon-esque type of
never seen it, but continue.
Oh, you should watch it. It's good.
Okay.
because you can live forever, and you can almost reincarnate yourself, and you can rebrand, and you can reinvent yourself over and over and over again. They do seem to be branching out into the other kind of related areas of feminism, like the LGBTQ, the intersectionality, the feminism, and the cultural diversity is part of that. It's like when you run out of good story to tell, where do you go? You look somewhere else, right? Mm. And that's kind of what I feel is going on. Is like it's like with Moana, especially. It was you know, it's a very beautiful film, and she was kind of a younger princess, but I wouldn't hold her in the same level of esteem as the classic princesses.
Oh, I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And now that brings us to where does that leave us with the princes? Now there's so much more we can talk about, but I as a guy am going to mansplain why we need to talk about the prince, all the princes in the story, in these stories.
Excellent. I love mansplaining.
But now I'm a little curious. Faith, who's your favorite Disney prince?
The Beast.
The Beast. Okay. Christina, who's your favorite?
I'm actually in agreement with Faith here. I think he's the good prince.
And my favorite is, this is why I was kind of defending Philip earlier. Philip is my favorite prince if I was to give it, because and I'll give you both to explain why the Beast is your favorites. But for me, Philip, and even Shang a little bit in Mulan has this, but I feel like he is an independent thinker from his father. You definitely see this in the first scene where he interacts with his father. He's attracted to Aurora at first by her voice, not by the way she looks. And
like Eric.
Yeah, okay, touche. And also his armor is really cool, and he has a magic sword which he uses to slay the dragon. And every little boy, even the ones raised by gender non-binary parents, it doesn't matter. Every little boy wants to slay a dragon. That's just the way you grow up. That's why you go from dragons to dinosaurs to Batman villains. It's just a natural progression. Of course, in my nephew's case, from dragons to dinosaurs to evil Pokemon. But nonetheless, there's always that boyish desire to slay the ultimate evil that's right in front of you. Which a lot of people don't realize this, but this is one reason I was so disappointed in the live-action remake of Sleeping Beauty, Maleficent with Angelina Jolie. Is Maleficent is actually a word in the dictionary, which means the ultimate evil. And so to me, when you take away the very meaning of her name from her character, it totally destroys it. And actually, I think Screen Junkies said this in their honest trailer of Maleficent. And she is consistently voted at usually between her and Chermanog. I can't think of his name, but the demon from Fantasia. They're consistently voted as the top Disney villains, or sometimes Captain Hook gets in there, but that's why I like Philip. So Faith, I'll let you go first. Why do you like the Beast? Why is he your favorite prince?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of similar to what you were just talking about. I completely agree with you about Philip, and that is his journey, and that's really, really appealing to boys. And I think, yeah, Philip is a very kind of real character, as opposed to Sleeping Beauty, who's kind of this kind of symbolic character, but he really kind of takes on this very manly task and accomplishes it. So I agree with you there. The Beast is doing the same thing, but internally. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
The arc of the Beast is basically that he's got all these masculine urges. He wants to fight. He's ambitious. He's filled with rage. He's got all of these very masculine things going on. And at the beginning, he is just kind of like using them. They're unchecked. He's like, you're not beautiful. You're gone. You want help. Forget it. He's just kind of like at will, letting his masculinity kind of out. And his arc is not as like a feminist would want it to be. It is not to get rid of that masculine energy because, it's toxic. His job is to figure out how to channel that energy into something good. And the something good is the protection, love, and care of Belle. And he does that. He comes to realize that he wants to do that because Belle remains unequivocally herself. She never tries to make him do. She doesn't yell at him. I mean, Jasmine. One of my problems with Princess Jasmine is she's always yelling at Aladdin about stuff. Yes. She's right, but she's always yelling at him about it, and I just don't think that's very ladylike. And I don't think it's useful to a man to have a woman be yelling at you all the time. So
I can attest to that.
Yeah, right. So anyway, I just think that the arc of the Beast is a very it's a sort of masculine arc that takes him from this kind of unchecked masculinity to still masculinity, but channeled towards Belle. And I guess shameless plug, I wrote about this on my blog as my second blog post about why women fall in love with monsters, and it's that women are really attracted to that masculinity. And if you get rid of it, it's like, oh, we don't, we're not attracted to that. I know that everybody's different, etc., and that's fine. But I think in general, women, straight women, are attracted to that masculine energy, and I think that it's something that men want to do, is to channel that energy. And if they can find a partnership with a woman who doesn't let them fall off the deep end, then I think that that's a way that they can do that. So I just really like that arc.
You know what you said is very telling, actually, because like in the epic battle of Tangled versus Frozen, one thing that people have pointed out was even if you liked Elsa more as a princess, people tended to like Eugene more as a prince. There's so even though the appeal to that independent woman who doesn't need a man, they're still drawn to Eugene, who's kind of a bad boy. And like I said, I like Tangled better than Frozen. I think, for one thing, I think it had better. I know I'm probably again in the minority here, but I actually think it had better music than Frozen. But anyway, so Christina, tell us why you picked the Beast as your favorite prince.
I want to start off by saying Faith's blog post is very good.
Thank you.
Go ahead and do the narcissistic version of hers. I really like his arc because of the prince's, like, because of Belle's role in it. I mean, like, I think there's something to be said for a guy that can have all these things and do all these things, and is very strong, intelligent, ambitious, compassionate, and everything like that. But I like how, like, as a woman, you have the ability to kind of bring out the best. And I mean, like, when people talk about like marriage, it's like you're trying to make to build a family and build around individual parties as well as the collective. So you have this kind of like dualistic culture within your own relationship in many ways, where your husband wants you to be a better person and you become a better person because you want him to be a better person and he becomes a better person. You have such a I've likened a lot of things to like DNA before, and it's just that kind of give and take, and even all the twists that life has to offer. That is your home, and that's the home that you raise your kids in, and it's kind of like an enduring, it's an enduring, everlasting legacy. So I like that it's not enough to have those things. That you have to find a way to share them, and you have to find someone that you can share with, and you can essentially grow with. Like DNA, when you make a child, the DNA kind of comes together. In the same way with your life, when you get married, is you have all of this on one side and all of this on one side, and it has to blend together to in a harmonious way. Like I said, no matter what kind of gets thrown at you. So that's why I like the Beast, is because I feel like when Belle kind of surprises him with her entrance into his life, it's very jarring, and you can see the awkwardness and the vulnerability that eventually comes from that, as he learns to like take the good of what he has and even the bad of what he has and kind of transform it in a way that they can be together and just live happily ever after.
It's really cool. And I'm concerned with, because I feel like whenever you watch Frozen or Moana, is especially, like I said, I like Moana. I think it's a little bit more traditional princessy, but still bending. I feel like with the lack of a villain, that I think that not having a prince in these stories is why there's a lack of a villain. Because this is just my own opinion, and I'll probably be on BuzzFeed tomorrow morning for saying this, but I feel like that in the creators who develop these particular stories, there's evil because of masculinity, and when you look at like and so if you take the princes out, which are bringing the masculine, like Faith, you pointed out in Frozen, there really can't be a villain in it, because in their mind, toxic masculinity is what creates evil. It's not human nature, like we all, which is actually the truth, is that sometimes it's in human nature to be evil. And the evil people are the people who aren't able to suppress it with whatever. And as Christina pointed out, you know, faith in Jesus Christ, for instance, you can suppress the evil in you. And so I think that that's why, like, for instance, in Moana, the villain at the end is really Tahiti, which is their, am I pronouncing that correctly? Oh, okay, right. It's the spirit of the ocean. And so when they give her heart back, she turns back to normal. She wasn't really a villain. And same with Frozen, where there is no, I mean, I guess you could I actually said this to someone. They said, well, Hans is the antagonist. Well, no, he's not really. The antagonist is Elsa's narcissism. And that's one reason why I actually liked Frozen the first time I saw it, but I realized recently, so I watched it with a younger relative of mine, that it doesn't age well. So when you first see it, you're like, oh, this is a good movie. It's good and it's original. But then when you watch it later, you're kind of like, oh yeah, that doesn't really make any sense, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're blown away, because Idina Menzel, man, has she got a voice on her. So you're kind of blown away by this. But that's what I feel is, that's why as they're taking, that's why I don't think if they continue on this kind of bent, where they're trying to get away from the princes, you're going to see worse and worse villains, or they're just like in Frozen, they're just going to eliminate them altogether. And that's kind of a thing. And I probably won't go see them, because to me, that's what made some of the Disney movies for me, was it wasn't even the protagonist. I went to see the villain. And Disney has like this epic official Disney villain list. Frozen and Moana aren't even on it. So I'll let you two weigh in. Faith, I'll let you go. I'll let you go here. What do you think about Disney removing sort of the dashing prince from their stories?
Yeah, well, one interesting thing about the villains is that if you look at the princess movies, all of the villains are female until Beauty and the Beast. And the reason for that is that the traditional princess fairy tale, like if you look back at the original fairy tales, is a story about the princess breaking away. It's the princess versus the crone, right? And so she's breaking away from this kind of mother figure that's kind of aged out of womanhood almost. And she is sort of taking the place of that person. And that's the struggle. And that's where the villainhood comes in. And then the prince, you know, the reason everyone always complains, like, you know, the prince doesn't even have a name in Snow White, or the prince just shows up at the end and does, well, that's because the story is actually a woman's story. And the prince is actually just representative of the woman's readiness, or the girl's readiness to become a woman. And so he comes in at the end because she has gone through that internal personal journey and removed herself from the crone and is ready to cleave to the man. And so that narrative structure was sort of always there and in place. And as the feminists got hold of this princess narrative, then the villains become male, and then it's about their maleness. I mean, if you think about, I mean, Beauty and the Beast, I love Beauty and the Beast, but it really kind of rests right at the fulcrum of, like, here's the traditional princesses, and here are the the feminist princesses, because suddenly it is this sort of toxic male in Gaston. That is the kind of counterpoint to the Beast's good male. And in that story, we're still in the realm of reality, where a good man is a man whose masculinity is still intact. But then we sort of move away from that, and finally you get Hans, who's kind of like, he looks on paper like he's got all of the good prince stuff, and then suddenly he's a psycho. I mean, it's literally a psycho killer.
Right.
So I think that there's a problem there, and I think so. It sort of depends. I guess the answer to your question about do we need a prince in order for them to be a villain is that it depends. If we're dealing with the kind of traditional narrative, then I think the villains can absolutely be women, and that the princess can be sort of pitted against them, but that the prince does have to come in because the prince represents the end of her journey.
Mm-hmm.
So he has to be there. He doesn't necessarily have to be like this huge character that, you know, does X, Y, or Z. He just has to be there to vanquish the villain, because the villain is what's holding the princess back from becoming a woman. And so I think, you know, now that we're in this sort of weird waters of like, we don't really know who the princesses are and who the guys are, and it's all very confusing. And then I think, you know, I think then we have a problem, and it's definitely a problem when the princes start to be the villain, because what kind of message is that, you know? So that's terrible. So I think, I think really what I think is that the filmmakers want to be feminist, but they don't understand stories. They don't understand fairy tales. They don't understand archetypes. They don't understand symbolism. And so they're taking it all apart, and they don't know how to put it back together in some way that continues to make sense. And I think that's really the problem.
Yeah, they were saying, like, I have Black Panther, which I loved as a movie, by the way. But that was one of there were rumors of kind of turmoil within the production, where they had all these diversity hires who didn't actually know how to write a film. And so, like, they were clashing with some of the more veteran film writers and production crew, and there was kind of rumors of that going around. Fortunately, Ryan Coogler is actually a really good storyteller. He's a great director. Creed was amazing. So, but I'm saying I'm seeing what you're saying there, because it's not they don't really know how to tell these stories. And Christina, I'm going to lob it to you now. How do you see this sort of third wave feminism affecting Disney princes going forward?
Okay, well, going forward, well, you can only go where you're going one step at a time, fortunately. So there is some way to...
Not when you're on the left. They seem to go full 90 miles per hour ahead.
I always tell people, like when it comes to political stuff, it's good that we have kind of like a back and forth, because it's like walking. You're walking in a direction, and it's left foot, right foot. And so far, I feel like at this point, like, America's just going to split its pants. It's because the left is like way over here, and the right is kind of like trying to balance everything out. But with the feminism, I think a lot of it goes back to the old adage, you know, follow the money. They're going to try to make as much money as they can. I actually just went to go see like the Meg movie, and it was like, I was so cynical sitting through it, like, this is clearly marketed to China, but they'll love it.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I think with Moana, like, I didn't like Moana that much. I thought it was, in some level, very pandering. I thought they were trying to, I mean, it's the same, like, if you look at, I've told people this before, especially when I talk about, like, my historical fiction. Like, if you look at history moves in similar patterns in a very general sense. Like, tactics change, but goals, they either flip-flop, or the tactics are the what flip-flop. But so you can follow this kind of pattern all throughout, like, especially like American history is where my more specialized area is. And so when you talk about the culture, like, when it comes to this, like, the rise of feminism is supposed to be women being equal to men. You do have, like, with Rapunzel, some idea that they're supposed to be this, like, pretty level. And so they each have their own set of problems, and their solution is found kind of together in the dialectic complementary arcs. And so I do see a lot of promise for that part. I would really like to see more films kind of like The Princess and the Frog, where you have the prince as like, he has his own characters and his own flaws, and they kind of have to round each other out. With things like Frozen, I didn't like it because I didn't feel like it was honest, to be very honest. You know, and I mean, like, I liked the movie a lot. I liked the music, the cinematography is beautiful, the shots are great. I like the sisterhood thing. I mean, I come from I have two sisters. It's a very nice sisterhood sort of movie, and you don't have to see any blood oaths from the Yaya sisterhood one. So it's like, yay, bonus. As far as the future goes, I'm not really sure where they're going to go, but I do see more probably. I know there's a big push for Japanese princess. There's more.
Japanese don't have princesses.
Well, they have a little.
Oops.
Yeah.
And actually, like,
not be true. I don't know.
Princesses I would actually like to see them do is it's Sunduk. She's from the Korean culture.
Oh.
She's actually a very well-known astronomer in her time, and she used to she has like these legendary like tales that kind of follow her history, and it's really cool.
Faith, if you were to pick a story who you would like to see Disney do in kind of the traditional Disney princess, do you want to throw one out there?
Gosh, that they haven't done yet?
Yeah, because there are a bunch.
There are a bunch. I mean, I think it's kind of a problem because they have done sort of the big ones, and I think that then we're sort of doing. I always was kind of partial to Snow White and Rose Red. It's like a different Snow White.
I'm familiar with that story. That's
and there's story. And there's kind of the Beauty and the Beast element to it because there's like the bear that turns out to be a prince, I think, and stuff. So I always kind of found that one really haunting. And there's sisters in it, since Disney seems obsessed with family relationships that aren't romantic. So, you know, that, I don't know, that could be kind of interesting.
I would actually like to see them do another King Arthur movie because while I did enjoy The Sword in the Stone, it's actually a pretty good film. I think Arthurian legend has always been my favorite. I remember when I was young. I was in first grade, I think. My parents bought me a Legend of King Arthur book, and it was written more for kids, so it left like some of the stuff out, like him, you know. Well, never mind. But anyway, definitely it left out a lot of the more egregious stuff in the legend. But it followed the story pretty accurately from the time Arthur pulls the sword out of the stone when he's a young kid to the time of him retaking his father's throne. And it does end tragically, like the actual legend does. But I would actually like to see Disney do a really good animated King Arthur film. That's kind of my thing. Now, final question, because we're coming down to the end of our time. I am curious. There have been other princess movies besides the Disney ones. And I'm a little curious if you ladies were to name a favorite non-Disney princess. I actually was originally going to say Shuri from Black Panther. Then I remembered, oh, she's a Disney princess. So technically now. So Christina, I'll start with you. Who's one of your? I'll give a different one at the end. But who's your favorite non-Disney princess?
Favorite non-Disney princess is easily the Swan Princess. In the early '90s, I think it was. It was a Richard Rich production, and I knew the name because of all the Richie Rich films.
Odette, right? Princess Odette was her name.
Yeah, Princess Odette and Prince Derek, and it's actually a really funny movie in the sense that like so these two kids are like brought together in hopes that they'll fall in love and get married and their kingdoms will unite, and they meet every summer and they hate each other. And then when she becomes like a woman, like fast forward through several years and stuff, he actually is attracted to her and he tells them to arrange the marriage, and she's like, but wait, why? And then he's like, because you're beautiful. And she's like, what else? And he's like, what else is there? And I like how cute it is to see him kind of flounder. And it's if you watch some of the later movies, it has a really nice redemptive arc for him where he knows that he really loves her for who she is and not what she looks like. But just in that, like the music is really cute. It's based on the ballet, and you know, it's just a really like the thing about like Disney movies that does tend to bother me now is how many tropes that I see get repeated and rehashed. And the nice thing about this movie is like the talking animal thing. It doesn't seem out of place because she becomes a swan, and like I think more like with like Rapunzel and you know, with Sven from Frozen, you know, you have these animals that don't talk, but they're very anthropomorphic. I'm like, I don't know how much I buy into that and it's a suspension of disbelief. But the movie's very smooth, and the plot holds up really well. I mean, I watched it when I was really, really young, probably when I was my daughter's age now, and it's been almost 30 years. So it's pretty good.
Oh, all right, Faith, which one is yours?
That movie sounds really good. I don't know how I missed that movie. I'm now going to go watch it. I kind of liked Anastasia. Maybe
okay.
because it came out when I don't remember exactly when it came out, but I was still
Other favorite. So
yeah, like I was sort of still actively watching these movies, I think, when it came out. So I like it, but I think Dimitri is the name of the guy in that.
Oh yeah, he's really
no, the good guy.
Oh really? Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
The bad guy is Rasputin.
That's right.
Yeah, but Dimitri has a sort of Beauty and the Beast arc where, you know, he's sort of out initially for the money, and then he falls for Anya, who's Anastasia, and kind of comes to understand that there's more. I kind of like Eugene also, or Flynn, from Rapunzel, and Aladdin, right? All of these guys, you know, I once saw some, I can't remember where I saw it, but it was sort of like, why are all these Disney movies, why do they have all these bad boys? You know, as in like, you can't change a guy. Why are these bad guys? But it's like, no, it's the Beast. You know, it's these guys that really need this kind of civilizing influence. And I think that's there in that Anastasia movie. But I will also say that this has nothing to do with like feminism or whatever, but there's a movie of The Princess and the Goblin, which it's a cartoon. I don't know
that.
Who made it. I don't think it's Disney, so I think I'm still within the realm of this question. Anyway, it's just really haunting. It's scary, and it's kind of dark and kind of haunting, and I just remember watching it a lot as a kid and really liking it.
Is that the one with by Chesterton? Is that E.K. Chesterton?
The movie, or you mean the story?
Story.
I don't know. Someone was just recommending me a book of fairy tales that had this in it, but I don't remember the name of I don't think it was Chesterton.
I just Googled it. The Princess and the Goblin is based on a novel by George MacDonald.
Oh, okay.
That's it. George MacDonald is who was. Yeah.
But anyway, I was just curious because while y'all were talking, I was Googling. I was like, that actually sounds like a pretty interesting film. I'm going to go with Thumbelina, which is which this is actually kind of funny, but Don Bluth actually created Thumbelina, and or he wrote the film. And a lot of people don't know, it's not a Disney film. It's actually a Warner Brothers film. Warner Brothers, just before the Disney Renaissance, when Disney was still bringing out all those terrible films, Warner Brothers had like a spike of just amazing animated feature films, like Cats Don't Dance, and Thumbelina is part of that. And one thing that, and also Don Bluth, he actually, a lot of people don't realize this, but one of the reasons why Disney had a dry spell is 7 of their top animators quit Disney because they thought that they were the new, after Walt had died, they didn't like the direction that the guy who took over, because it wasn't Roy right away, Roy Jr. It wasn't Roy Jr. right away. I can't think of the guy's name, but they didn't like the direction he had taken the company. And so they left and started their own production company. And they did a film, which is one of my favorite animated films, called Rock-a-Doodle. And then later they joined with Warner Brothers, and they made Thumbelina and a couple other films. And they also did Anastasia, but they did that for, they didn't do that one for Warner Brothers, I don't think.
I think it's DreamWorks.
I think you're right. I think it is DreamWorks. And I know Sony did Swan Lake. So, but one of the reasons I like Thumbelina is, I liked the prince in that film. He's a fairy prince, and he's tiny like Thumbelina is, but he has this almost reckless courage about him whenever he's up against a foe that's larger than him. Like one of the foes is this really gross frog that is like obsessed with Thumbelina, and when the prince and him have like kind of their final showdown, the prince doesn't back down. He's very brave, and he fights this guy. So, but yeah, that's where I'm going to go with.
I actually really like that film too. "Let Me Be Your Wings" is actually on my wedding list of songs.
Oh, that's cool. That's a great song too. It's It's so funny how like people like I remember I was talking with this one girl who said that Disney needed to make more diverse princesses, and I said, well, just if you don't like the new Disney princesses like Frozen or Tangled, just go see a different Disney film, or I would go see a different princess film. And she's like, well, that's not possible. There are no others. And so like I kept sharing her links to Warner Brothers films that have princesses, but that's so funny. That's so much fun. But Faith, I'll start with you. Any closing thoughts before we take off?
First, this is really, really fun, and I'm really glad we did this, and I wish my life was like this. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I think I would just say that I hope that there is hope for Disney. I think that where it would come from is if the fans started to talk about what they really like, because I think a lot of this feminism stuff is coming from critics and the media. And I think that one of the things that is just not out there in the world, because regular people aren't writing op-eds and, having podcasts and things like that, is just that there are all of these regular people out there who kind of like the whole idea of like femininity and masculinity and fairy tales and story. And I think that we're out here, and I think that we need to sort of make ourselves known, because there is that bottom line issue of like they need to make money, and so they're sort of listening to these critics because that's the only voices that are out there, and they're like, oh, okay, we need to be really radically feminist because that's who these critics are. But really, that's just this very small minority of people. And actually, it's interesting to watch. Tangled, which, as we've said, is this throwback, was like a huge financial success, and then they turn around and they make Brave and Frozen, and it's like, what? And those are obviously huge financial successes as well. But it's just sort of like, you can be successful making these stories that people really love. And so I think there's hope, and I think it's with us.
And that's so true, because I remember when the Power Rangers movie came out, the director came out and he said, this is a movie for the Power Rangers fans who grew up in the 90s. This is not a movie for anyone else. We made this specifically for the fans. What happens? It gets critically panned, but it makes a ton of money, and they're already talking about doing a sequel. So that's absolutely true. And you see this also happening with the superhero films, where the critics really love the DC films, the fans hate them. The fans love the Marvel films, and I'll be honest, the critics are kind of more, they like the Marvel films, but they're a little bit more tepid with them. I actually got into a Twitter fight with the movie critic over at the Washington Free Beacon, because he wrote a review for Avengers Infinity War, and I swear he didn't actually watch the movie. Everything he said was incorrect, actual facts about the film. And so he and I got into a Twitter war, and he has a podcast. His name is Sunny something. And I actually said his podcast, I kind of teased him because I said, oh, wow, I see why your podcast is called The Substandard, because he wasn't even defending his review. He was just attacking me after I was going after point by point why his review was going. It's still on Twitter. It's fine. But anyway, Christina, back to you. Any final thoughts before we close?
Got the mom brain sometimes. Well, just thank you for having me, and it's just it will be interesting to see where they go with it. I think it's kind of, I think when there's so much that goes involved into whether or not some things are a success, and like listening to the critics is kind of like the more traditional, like, I mean, you kind of see this in publishing too, where you have certain gatekeepers that are out there, and they're starting to get broken down as technology and just ingenuity have kind of redefined the industry. And I think it's hard to do this kind of with some things, because movies take a while to write and to put together and everything, and you have to kind of put your thumb on the culture heartbeat, the pulse of the culture is a really hard read. I mean, you can't tell if you have cancer if you're looking for a pulse, So I think I think that they do need more diversity in their critics, and I do think I agree with Faith. I definitely agree with Faith that more regular people should be able to step up and say it. But I think too, it's just kind of it is a difficult balance because you have to read the culture and kind of to try to appease everybody. You do have a more general sort of you have more general topics to play with, and those might not necessarily be traditionally feminine or modernly feminine. I mean, one generation's chains is another generation's liberation. So it's kind of a, I mean, like, I think a lot of their movies are really great. And, but yeah, I'm not buying Moana for my daughter. So.
I don't blame you. Besides, Coco was better anyway. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you both to Faith and C.S. Johnson for coming on StudioJake with me today. You can find me on Twitter at RealJacobAiry. Instagram is real.jacob.airy. Today I have a picture with me and Greg Gutfeld. Yes, I'm name dropping. Get over it. It's my blog. I can do what I want. You can find me on Facebook at author Jacob Airy. My blog is jacobairy.blog because why not? And you can also, on my blog, I have my book announcement for The 7 Royals, All Good Things. My cover art is 99% done, and I'm in the final stages of editing, so hopefully you will see that very soon. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time right here on StudioJake.